Мы ездим из одной юридической фирмы в другую, пытаемся понять, что происходит в Сингапуре, и пытаемся понять, как так вышло, что Сингапур стал ключевой страной для того, чтобы войти на рынок в Китае и для того, чтобы иметь возможность взаимодействовать с бизнесменами различных стран. Действительно, произошла ситуация, когда Сингапур был включен в список недружественных стран. Как это произошло, это отдельная история, но сингапурские предприниматели, сингапурские юристы очень сильно сожалеют об этом. Не знаю, как бы все вышло, если бы этого не произошло, но сейчас они, насколько я понимаю, предпринимают много шагов для того, чтобы все-таки ситуация была изменена в лучшую сторону, и чтобы Сингапур покинул этот список тех стран, которые почему-то по каким-то причинам присоединились к санкциям против России. Но ведь нужно сказать, что Сингапур фактически присоединился к очень небольшой части санкций. Он не поддержал санкции Европы, он не поддержал санкции Соединенных Штатов Америки, британские санкции и так далее. Hello! And where is Armenian Street?
This is Armenian.
Oh, Armenian Street is here. Great.
And when they open up the blinds, you have a beautiful room on the top there that looks out over the whole city.
Видишь, это робот полицейский. Не надо ему мешать, а то он нас арестует.
So it's supported by steel grids like that.
I see.
So that's level 6. Level 7 actually doesn't have any offices. There, we're now in level 7. And the flying saucer is coming up. The CEUs we literally in front. Everything beyond that is reclaimed land. So all of the Marina Bay Sands is actually built on reclaimed land. That you have there. Singapore River, where the main river of commerce for Singapore.
To start, could you tell something about legal system of Singapore?
The legal system?
Yes.
In general?
Yes, in general.
Okay. Well, you are here at the Supreme Court of Singapore, but the interesting thing is that the Supreme Court of Singapore doesn't sit as the entire Supreme Court. We are actually at 2 levels. At the highest level, you have the Court of Appeal, which is the highest level, and then the next is the High Court of Singapore. So within the High Court, you have the General Division of the High Court, of which the SICC is part of, and then you have the Appellate Division, where appeals either from the lower courts can come to that court to hear, or even sometimes appeals from the High Court of Singapore from the General Division, but not the SICC. And the third one is you have the Family Justice Courts as part of the High Courts of Singapore. So that would be the Supreme Court that comprises the Court of Appeal and the High Court, and then you have the state courts, which have your magistrates' matters, your district court matters to be heard, right? So that's the general system in that sense. And of course, as you know, we are a common law jurisdiction, right? So unlike Russia, which is civil law.
I see. Why was founded CICC? What was the purpose of this court?
Okay. What happened was back in 2013, the Chief Justice looked at the development of growth, business, finance, investment in Asia. And as he noticed that all this was growing, 2 things will be happening. Number one, because of that growth, you have more disputes, without doubt. More transactions, more disputes. But secondly, and more importantly, those disputes get more complex. It's no longer A sells to B, and B pays A a sum of money. A could be representing a group of investors. B can be a start of a string of contracts down the road. So you end up with your complex, multi-party, multi-contract situations. And when that happens, parties demand effective dispute resolution. So the thinking was, could Singapore be a trusted neutral forum to resolve such complex disputes, whether through arbitration, mediation, or litigation? And where litigation was concerned, we looked at a process, a basis where it was not a normal court-based system, a very sovereign court where parties may not feel comfortable because am I in a Singapore court? So is there potentially any bias? But we said no. We will set up a court in Singapore, but not a Singapore court, where you have foreign judges who can sit and hear matters, and you have lawyers who are not Singaporean lawyers that can come and represent parties here. So you truly have a very different form of court-based litigation dispute resolution. And that was the thinking behind why the SICC was set up.
Thank you. Did any Russian cases were in CICC?
We've had some matters involving some Russian parties, right? And some of that is also because there are setting aside applications from arbitration seated in Singapore that the SICC hears also. And unfortunately, because of that, I can't mention any names. The parties, Alex. Yeah. So yes, we've heard matters so far. Right now, we are into our 8th year. We started in 2015, we're into our 9th year. We've completed 8 years. And even up to this point in time, we've had matters concerning 49 different nationalities before the court. Not just Russian, not just Singaporean, of course, but Vietnamese, Chinese, American, French, Italian.
Great.
Name it, and I think all the ASEAN countries. So you have that. So it is truly an international court for international matters.
How do you choose judges for your court?
We have a bench of our Singapore judges and beyond, who are, many of them are also very come from commercial background. Not all of them came from the legal system, but many of them came from practice, right? So I mean, even our president of the court right now, Justice Philip Jeyaretnam was chairman of one of the international law practices, chairman for Asia of one of the international law practices before he became a judge. He was even a senior counsel. We have a few others who were also senior counsel, involved in whether it's shipping, intellectual property, construction matters. But the other ones is our 19 international judges, and they come from both civil law and common law jurisdictions. Amongst them, you have 4 former Chief Justices. So from United Kingdom, from Canada, from Australia, and New South Wales in Australia. We have judges. The civil law ones are from China, Japan, and France, as an example, right?
Right.
And they cover things like whether it's insolvency, bankruptcy, complex matters, construction, intellectual property, and what have you. So they were chosen for their commercial experience in especially dispute resolution, and all of them except one, or almost all of them except one, were former judges, right? And today, if you do look at them, the list of the names for those in the arbitration practice, you will find that they're all very familiar because all of them are very established arbitrators also. But when they're outside of the court duties, they only sit as arbitrators outside. They will not be counsel.
I see.
Could you tell something?
Okay, Alex, welcome to Court 4A of the Supreme Court of Singapore.
Thank you very much.
This is one of the 2 courts that we specially designed for the Singapore International Commercial Court. I mean, you're familiar with the SICC, but I think this is the first time you're actually looking at the courtroom since COVID in that sense. We took the opportunity during COVID to redesign this courtroom, and what we did was we tried to design it to be modern, to meet the new needs of dispute resolution, which is not just physical, but even hybrid or even full virtual, right? So what you see is, I think the one distinctive feature you realize is there's the absence of wood. You have pure marble, you have nice grey fittings, and but no traditional dark wood elements, right? That's to give it a more uplifting look that you have. And even when you see all the council tables over here, they are no longer fixed. So you notice that they actually can be reconfigured. There are actually wheels underneath, right?
Great.
And for connection, most people use laptops nowadays, so we have PowerPoints. We even have LAN connections over there, so you need to connect and to transmit images onto the monitor and all. It can just be done. But it's not just wired. We also have wireless connection.
Okay.
Okay. So as counsel, you can be standing here, presenting. One of your associates could be on a laptop, throwing up the exhibit onto the display that you see there. Right? And you know, unfortunately, with lots of hearings, there's lots of paperwork and folders. So if you wonder why there's a funny design over there, that's for you to put folders behind. So you don't need too many bookshelves. And even it's purpose-built, Alex, because if you're wondering why the wall design looks like this, because every panel you have down here is flipped down.
Really?
So you can have more folders on the side. And it doesn't look so ugly having wooden shelves that you have, right? So we have this. We have, of course, the microphones are always on, right? And for how many positions that you
Hello.
Exactly. And I see that you're holding a wireless charger, so if you run out of power in your phone, move the microphone aside and you can charge it there.
Really?
That's why all the microphones are actually moving in that sense. There you are charging your phone already. Okay.
It's charging.
And you notice the monitor is also because what we have is you have remote witnesses, so the witnesses can appear there, or even if counsel is not present in the courtroom, or maybe even one of our judges could be in London, right? So the judge will appear on the monitor there.
Great.
That's why you have fantastic speakers, hidden speakers over there too, and you can see lots of cameras around, right? Even that one over there is for the judges. So you can see various parts for various audiences wherever they could be in the world. I mean, like even we had one case towards the end of COVID where we had 9 witnesses over 6 days from about 5 different jurisdictions at different times.
Fantastic.
And because the timings were such that courtroom hours were running from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. every day, rather than 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. to accommodate all parties, including the judges. Because you have one judge here in Singapore, one in Japan, and one in London. So that's the modern international dispute resolution that we have.
Yes, I see.
Right? So you have this, you have a fantastic sound system. Of course, you have space for 3 judges over there. As you know, the SICC can have a difference between 1 to 3 judges. Yes, and even on the monitor now, Hakim has shown the 19 international judges that we have. Right?
Great.
So they can be from United Kingdom, China, Japan, Hong Kong, India, France, the US, Canada, and of course Australia. Right? So they can be there hearing a matter remotely or physically in the courtroom.
And do all these judges, they're current judges or they're retired judges from their countries?
Except for Dominique Harsher from France, who's still on the Cour de Cassation in France. The rest are all retired.
And they have a great experience at...
They are very astute commercial judges in the past. I mean, a quick example, you have bottom left Christopher Sonchi, who was a former chief judge of the Delaware Court of Chancery, one of the 2 foremost bankruptcy courts in the US, right? You have 4 chief justices, in fact. You have Lord Neuberger, from former president of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. You have Robert French, who was a former Chief Justice of Australia.
Oh, I know Anselmo Rice.
Of course.
We should meet with him at Hong Kong in 1 week.
Okay, next week.
Yes.
Or towards the end end of August too, I think.
Yes.
Yes, the Hong Kong Arbitration Week.
Yes.
Which is
He's
happening.
the first person who made an appointment for me at 8 a.m. For breakfast.
Very good. Very good. And of course, Beverly McLaughlin, the former Chief Justice of Canada. And
Great.
Thomas Bathurst was the Chief Justice of New South Wales, Australia. Then you talk about intellectual property, you have Simon Torley out of the UK. You talk about construction and complex matters, Vivian Ramsey from UK and Douglas Jones from Australia. So they are very established
Yes.
in various commercial fields.
Great.
Yeah?
Hi Sasha, welcome to Singapore. Welcome to Braddell Brothers.
Welcome. Thank you very
Follow
much.
me.
Great.
This is our office.
Okay, Edmund, could you tell something about Singaporean legal system, about some specific things which we see at these times?
Yeah, I think people actually wonder whether Russian companies, Russian persons can still get representation in Singapore arbitrations. The answer is yes. We are open for Russian work. Our second minister for law made this very clear at last year's Singapore Convention Week. And the basic policy is that we should be able to represent people with disputes seated in Singapore, SIC disputes, it doesn't really matter, but we can represent Russian companies. A little bit more about the Singapore legal system. We're actually based on the English legal system. And so if you see a Singapore contract looks very much like an English contract. We are very pro-arbitration in Singapore. Our courts are extremely pro-arbitration. And if there's any concern that our courts may be prejudiced because of what is happening in certain parts of the world, I can assure you there's no prejudice against Russian companies or Russian people. They will get justice in Singapore arbitrations. They will get justice in the Singapore courts.
And what about deposit?
So a big problem I understand from different institutions is the difficulty of Russian companies or Russian persons placing deposits for arbitrations as are required along the way. In Singapore, we don't have these problems. If the deposit is being made for purposes of an arbitration seated in Singapore, my understanding from SIAC is that the deposits can be accepted and the arbitrations can proceed. There is no problem.
Could you tell a little bit about sanctions? Did Singapore support UK sanctions and so on?
No, Singapore does not follow US, UK, or EU sanctions. Singapore has imposed a very, very limited list of financial sanctions in relation to 4 banks only. As far as other sectors of the economy are concerned, we cannot obviously supply anything towards the military. Directly or indirectly, we cannot supply technology directly or indirectly towards the effort that's going on for the special operation. But otherwise, in all other sectors, all other commercial sectors, we are able in Singapore, as Singapore firms, to act for sanctioned companies. There is no restriction on this.
Do Russian business works at Singapore? Do you know some Russian businessmen, maybe without names, I understand?
No, there is a Russia-Singapore Business Council. I understand it's quite active. There is a lot of Russian presence in Singapore. As far as we are concerned, from the business perspective, we are still doing business with Russian companies, again, with the exception of anything that falls under those very limited measures imposed by our Ministry for Foreign Affairs.
As I know, you're not just a person who likes Russia. You visit Russia usually during St. Petersburg International Forum. Could you tell us about your experience? You've been to Moscow the last time, I think 2023, May, to visit to St. Petersburg Forum.
Yes. So I was recently in St. Petersburg with, in fact, a representative of the Singapore International Arbitration Center. And we met many lawyers there. There was an impression that somehow, because Singapore is on the unfriendly countries list, that we cannot act for Russian individuals or Russian corporations. That's completely untrue. And we had to do quite a lot of work, actually, speaking with Russian lawyers and in fact some government officials to tell them it's not the case that we have shut our doors to Russian work. We're very much interested in doing Russian work and acting for Russian entities. And I think the basic premise is everyone has a right to legal representation. If you have a genuine dispute, it is seated in Singapore. You should be able to resolve it in accordance with the arbitration agreement that you have signed in Singapore at SIAC or ICC or any other institution in Singapore.
Это Сингапур, чайна-таун. Сейчас мы с вами можем наблюдать замечательную картину. Совсем недавно в Сингапуре был национальный день, когда все сингапурцы праздновали. Они выходили непосредственно к Марина Бэй и смотрели, как вокруг взрываются петарды, запускаются фейерверки, и все замечательно, все хорошо. Сейчас идет дождь, но мы на самом деле очень рады, потому что сегодня целый день в Сингапуре было жарко. Вы спросите, почему ключевую особенность играет именно чайна-таун? Да потому что основная масса людей, которые проживают в Сингапуре, какой национальности? Правильно, они китайцы. Правда, они говорят немножко на другом языке, чем обычно мы привыкли воспринимать, когда общаемся с нашими дорогими товарищами ханьцами, которые приезжают из центрального Китая. Но, тем не менее, понять их возможно, если вы учили тунхуа. Так вот, дорогие мои друзья, пойдемте посмотрим, что там такого интересного нам подготовил чайна-таун. Это центр Сингапура. Вперед!
Yeah, sure.
Дорогие коллеги, мы с вами находимся на мосту. Этот мост связывает несколько зданий, комплексы, административные здания СИАК и здание, в котором проходят все необходимые слушания. Можете посмотреть, здесь небоскребы, с одной стороны, с другой стороны. Прекрасная погода, потому что над Сингапуром никогда не заходит солнце. Только иногда начинает идти небольшой тропический дождь. Сегодня мы с вами будем говорить о том, каким образом происходит рассмотрение дела СИАКи. Мы посмотрим и послушаем наших коллег из Сингапурского международного арбитражного центра, как им удалось построить такой замечательный арбитражный институт, который начал конкурировать с ведущими арбитражными институтами мира. Пойдемте. Let's have a look. Hello.
Hello, hi Alexander.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to Singapore and welcome to Maxwell Chambers, where we as IAC are located.
Could you show me SIAC and other things which are here at Maxwell Chambers building?
Yes, definitely. Have you been to Maxwell Chambers?
Yes, I've been here before, but it was maybe 5 years ago. Everything has changed.
This is an integrated complex. There are hearing facilities here, and you are in the wing where a lot of the arbitration, mediation, and other international disputes resolution proceedings take place. So we are taking the lift up, and we will show you at least the lobby area of Maxwell Chambers.
Great. Excellent.
So we are now at the third floor. This is where the lobby of Maxwell Chambers is. And when we have gatherings, sometimes we have receptions here as well. But let us show you to our offices.
Okay.
And this is to the new wing, which is called Maxwell Chambers Suites. And that is a complex which has many offices. Many international institutions have offices there. SIAC's offices here, and so are many other international institutions like ICC, ICGR, WIPO, PCA, and others also have their offices here. So I take you onto our link bridge, which leads us to the SIAC office.
Sorry, is it a real bridge?
It is. It is a
Really?
real bridge. And it was introduced in 2019.
Oh,
when
great.
They refurbished the building, and you can actually see some parts of Singapore from this bridge. This side that you are taking is the business district, if you can see, and on the other side, there's a hotel and also some of our public housing. So,
Great.
And the tallest building in Singapore.
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
All right. So let's go on. And so we're bringing you to the SIAC offices. And as you can see, there's a lot of boarding because we are doing some renovations for our office.
Renovation is rather similar to Moscow. We also have such meaning.
Yes, and so there's quite a lot of renovation works going on at the moment.
Okay, let's go inside. Thank you for hosting me here. And I have the first question. Could you tell about the history of your arbitration center and briefly about legal system of Singapore?
Right, so for those who are unfamiliar with SIAC, the Singapore International Arbitration Center, we were set up in 1991, so we have 3 decades of history. And we were set up many years ago as a result of recommendations by an economic committee that thought that it was important to have an international arbitration center in Singapore to support Singapore's development as a legal services hub. So when we first started in 1991, we started with a grand total of 2 cases. But I'm very happy to share that today, international arbitration has developed tremendously, both in Singapore and all over the world. And we now take in annual new cases, between 350 to 500 new cases annually. And in terms of the users that we have seen over the past 5 years, we have handled cases involving more than 100 jurisdictions. So parties from all over the world have used us in their international arbitration proceedings. And Singapore, we have common law roots. We have Westminster system, and so our laws are governed by our constitution, of course, and legislation, as well as judge-made law. Our international arbitration framework is governed by an International Arbitration Act. So that's for international cases. We have also a domestic act for domestic arbitrations. So there's a lot of flexibility in Singapore when it comes to the practice of international arbitration. Lawyers of any nationality can participate in arbitration proceedings. Parties are free to choose, any governing law, any seat of arbitration, and we have a judiciary in Singapore that is very familiar with international arbitration, and there are a lot of pro-arbitration decisions that have been made by our courts to support the development of international arbitration. So we have very strong legislation that supports international arbitration. We are a member of the New York Convention, and our laws are ancestral model law compliant, and we have a very supportive judiciary who understands international arbitration. In terms of a legal services hub, Singapore, many international firms and also Singapore firms that work regionally are based here. They have very strong international dispute resolution practices, and they do a lot of international disputes work out of Singapore, not just the domestic but also for the region. So I think in a nutshell, this is kind of the landscape you have in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as I understand, all people in Singapore, all staff of SIAG, speak English very well.
We try to.
You do. You do.
Thank you. Yes.
It's very important for our Russian lawyers that they could come to Asia, they could tell to all the people, people at the reception, for example, they speak good English, and our colleagues, our lawyers, they shouldn't be lost at your city. It's great.
Yes, I think it's very easy to get around in Singapore, and also working with SIEC. We have a multinational composition for our secretariat, and if you look at our website, you will see that we have lawyers who work in the secretariat from all over the world. We have our registrar, who is Kevin Nash, he's Canadian. We have Vivek, who is of Indian origin, and so we have a very international mix of lawyers and from all over the world, and also with qualifications in both civil law and common law disciplines. So we handle quite a lot of international cases, and I think that's very important for parties, that the lawyers in the secretariat, running the cases, understand the specifics and the peculiarities of different jurisdictions, and parties all over the world are very comfortable using us. So in one of the international surveys that was conducted in 2021, as a seat for arbitration, Singapore emerged joined first with London. It is also one of the most preferred seats, and appears as most preferred seat in all the regions, actually, in the top 4 in all regions. So Singapore as a seat is something that users are comfortable with. SIAC also emerged in that same survey as the second most preferred and the most preferred in the Asia Pacific. So in this part of the world, we are one of the most preferred institutions, and I think it's because of what we offer, and also parties are very comfortable working with our secretariat. And like you said, the working language is English, but we have counsel who are able to operate in other languages as well.
Great. As I understand, SIAG becoming stronger and stronger, and right now you compete with the different arbitration centers, LCIA and so on. Imagine, why are you the best choice for Russian lawyers? Imagine, that Russian lawyers, they're listening to you, and you have a possibility to tell them why they should go to SIAC, to Singapore.
I think what companies all over the world want is a trusted, predictable, reliable forum and of course neutral and independent forum for resolution of the disputes. So for SIAC, like I said, we have done well over the years in international surveys because we have been able to, I think, serve these needs for the companies and users that have used us. I think the other reason why parties use us is we have also a very strong set of rules that are aligned with international practices. We are constantly updating on rules to ensure that there are mechanisms that ensure parties can save time and costs, right, in getting the dispute resolved. So I think, and also that coupled with the expertise we have in case management, and Vivek can share with you some of the details of what we do as part of the Secretariat in ensuring the fair economic, expedient management of the case from start to end. I think these are things that companies look for, they value, and I think most importantly, they also want an accessible, an institution that's accessible. And I hope that users that have used us have found us accessible. We're just a call away, and we want to maintain that good relationship with our users and the arbitrators that work with us.
Thank you very much. Could you kindly tell me about how do you choose arbitrators at SIAC?
Sure. At the core of what we do as an arbitral institution is obviously managing the cases that are filed with us. And in addition, the SIAC is also the statutory appointing authority for appointing arbitrators in Singapore under the legislation that is applicable here. We do realize that users of arbitration services anywhere in the world are primarily looking for cost-efficient dispute resolution services, a process that is conducted fairly by a qualitative neutral, such as an arbitrator, resulting in a good decision that is enforceable across the world under the New York Convention. So the quality of the people that we appoint to our cases is crucial, and I think we take that very seriously. And we address that in multiple ways. Firstly, of course, under the rules, parties can nominate anybody they wish to as an arbitrator, and they have that freedom under the SIAC rules. But of course, anybody who's nominated as an arbitrator is subject to appointment by the president of the SIAC Court of Arbitration. And the SIAC also conducts a fairly rigorous conflict check with anybody who's nominated, and they must sign a statement of independence, impartiality, and availability before they can be appointed to any case. So that's one way we ensure the quality of the people who are appointed. Secondly, when we are called upon to appoint arbitrators, we do take into account a few factors. First of which is the nationality of the parties, and to the extent possible, we aim to appoint somebody of a neutral nationality, particularly when we're appointing a sole arbitrator or a presiding arbitrator of a 3-member tribunal, or a larger tribunal for that matter, because we want to ensure that there is neutrality in terms of who is actually deciding and determining your disputes. Secondly, it's the sector and area in which the dispute arises, and we want to appoint people who have the relevant experience and expertise to be able to determine disputes arising from those areas. So for instance, if you have a construction dispute or a maritime dispute or a corporate joint venture dispute or an intellectual property related dispute, we want to appoint people who have the expertise in those areas. And I think we're also equally serious about promoting, improving, and ensuring diversity across a range of factors: geographies, age, cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, and gender diversity. That's something that we constantly look to ensure in making our appointments, because we do realize that that goes to improving the decision making of arbitrators, particularly keeping in mind that our users come from a variety of jurisdictions, backgrounds, and sizes, so to speak. Thirdly, we do have a list of arbitrators that we rely on that is publicly available on our website. It's referred to as the SIIC panel of arbitrators. It comprises over 500 experienced arbitrators from about 40 jurisdictions. And what this list allows us is to tap on the expertise of the most experienced arbitrators from around the world when we make our appointments. And the process of getting onto that panel is also a fairly rigorous one. There are several criteria that need to be satisfied. And what we are looking for is people who can demonstrate qualifications, expertise, and experience in acting as an arbitrator, or the ability to act as an arbitrator. And all these applications are closely scrutinized by the Secretariat. They are assessed by the Executive Committee of the SIIC Court of Arbitration before someone is placed on the list of arbitrators. So that ensures, again, that the quality of the people that we are appointing is standardized to some extent. Fourthly, and I think this is quite important, is the function that the Secretariat performs of reviewing awards that are to be made by arbitrators. Any award that is to be made by an arbitrator in SIIC cases must be approved by the registrar before it can be issued. Now, what that is actually intended and designed for is to maintain the quality of the awards that are coming out of SIIC cases. At the same time, to eliminate any potential grounds for challenges to awards or grounds that would prevent their enforcement under the New York Convention. And the review process actually is conducted as per a checklist that's available on our website as well. But what the review also allows us to do is to assess arbitrators and how they are performing in their decision-making process and the conduct of the proceedings, whether they're being qualitative, whether they're being efficient. And that helps us, I think, assess who to appoint in the future as well, because I think it gives us the best way to understand who are the good arbitrators. So I've given you a long answer to your question, but that is how I think involved the process of selecting arbitrators is and assessing arbitrators is, and we take that very seriously.
Do you have Russian cases at SIAC?
Yes, of course.
Could you tell something about it?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we have had arbitrations involving Russian parties. To give you a sense, in the past 5 years or so, we've administered cases involving at least 40 Russian parties, and we continue to receive cases involving Russian parties. I think the total sum in dispute, I understand, involving Russian parties in the past five or so years is about USD $1.9 billion. So it's a fairly large, I think, quantum and number of cases that we continue to administer involving Russian parties. And as you may know, in 2021, SIIC actually joined a select group of institutions that were designated or granted the permanent arbitral institution status by the Russian Ministry of Justice. So that gives us the ability to actually administer arbitrations, international arbitrations that are seated in Russia, or particular kinds of Russian corporate disputes in particular, such as those that arise under shareholder agreements and share purchase agreements and share pledge agreements, for instance, in relation to Russian companies. So we are well placed to administer arbitrations involving Russian parties.
That's excellent.
Great.
These are all reserved for like student meetings.
No, student meetings. Great. Suppose I should be a student and have a meeting here.
The building was made in a way to make it sustainable. So they keep the roof open, and you can see the giant fans there to cut down on the air conditioning costs. Yeah, so they've done a wonderful job making it a green Singapore. Showing some friends around here from Moscow State University. Yeah, so they're curious about how we become successful in Muting. What our secrets are. It's a rough place to be. Yes.
Great. Moment.
Jessup and
Professor Alex, welcome to Singapore. And
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Law Society. Welcome to my firm.
That's great. Interesting statue. Justice.
Let me show you around. I actually got this from Thailand.
Oh.
It was quite painful to import it. I want to introduce you to this poster actually. You know who that is?
Unfortunately, no. I guess.
It's Lee Kuan Yew.
Lee Kuan Yew. He was barrister.
Our-
Harry Lee.
Harry Lee, that's right.
Yes.
Our founding Prime Minister.
Yes.
Okay, so this is my humble office. My colleagues are all
They're
working
working.
in these rooms. This is my conference room.
Oh, great pictures to you.
So we paid a premium for this view, which we don't get very much time to look up.
We should look to the window. You could walk, and we should look to the window.
Well,
That's great.
yeah, so that's Indonesia.
Oh,
Yeah.
so close. Pacific.
You see the Singapore Airlines on the floor? Okay, that is the F1 racetrack.
Really?
Yeah, so the F1 Grand Prix comes to Singapore every September. So you just miss it. Next month is our F1 Grand Prix.
Great.
So we can actually watch F1 from here. People pay
Really?
a lot. Yeah, we can watch F1 from here. This is the circuit.
F1 here.
Yeah. So you see the road where the green bus is? That's part of the F1 circuit. So they actually race along the road. We close the entire city for them to race.
I should say in Russian. Гонки Формулы-1 проходят в сентябре в Сингапуре, и он там, где едет зеленый автобус, как раз-таки идет трасса, потом выходит вот здесь, и юристы этой юридической фирмы и Law Society могут абсолютно бесплатно наблюдать и восхищаться тем, что происходит во время гонки. Great!
And our National Day was just over. So during National Day, you will see a lot of fireworks in the sky.
I've been at 2017. I've been here at the National Day. It was very picturesque. A great deal of different drones flying and showing some pictures.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So we make a big song and dance on our National
Yes.
Day.
That is right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, welcome to Singapore.
Okay,
It's
let's
very
start
nice to
our
have you.
questions.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
It's time to work.
Yes. Okay. Could you say some words about Singapore legal system?
Sure. Okay. So we inherited our legal system from the British. So we have got a parliament setting the laws, and we have got a common law system. So whatever the laws do not cover adequately, the courts will develop law from the statutes and from the facts of each case. So we have a common law system. We have got within our government a Ministry of Law that looks into enacting new laws and revising existing laws to keep everything updated and relevant. Then other than the Ministry of Law, we then have our judicial system. We do not have a jury system, right? A judicial system where the judge decides the outcome of every case that comes before the courts, right? So we have got, in terms of hierarchy, we have the Court of Appeal, followed by the High Court, followed by the state courts. So anyone appearing before the courts, whether it is criminal or civil, there is this hierarchy that determines what types of cases goes before which court. So in a nutshell, we have that judicial system that oversees the day-to-day of how the law operates in Singapore.
Okay. Could you tell briefly about Law Society of Singapore? Because you are vice president of this Law Society.
Yeah, okay. So the Law Society of Singapore is a creature of statute. In other words, it is made by law. It exists by law. There is the Legal Profession Act, which determines and sets out how the law society should come about, how the members are formed, and the law society comprise of council members who are elected by the entire membership. So it is run by council members who are volunteers, who are day-to-day legal practitioners, and it is supported by a large team of secretariat support led by the Chief Executive Officer, assisted by our Chief Financial Officer, as well as our Chief Legal Officer. And then below this C-suite, we have got a team of about 40 to 50 employees running the entire law society on a day-to-day basis. Now, what the law society does is we admit new lawyers, we represent them, we educate them in terms of continuing professional education, we discipline them when they do wrong or when they get into trouble. So in a nutshell, the law society looks after the entire legal profession of about 6,000 lawyers in Singapore. So as far as the law society is concerned, now other than admitting them and making sure that the legal profession operates professionally on a day-to-day basis and does its job and represent people, we have to make sure that everyone behaves ethically and professionally, right? And there is also that welfare component where if any lawyer runs into difficulty, they can always look to the law society to see how we can help them out.
Okay. Could you tell briefly about your law firm?
My firm, okay. Well, before I talk about my firm, maybe I'll talk about the legal structure of law firms in Singapore.
Great.
Right?
That should be great.
So in Singapore, we have got, broadly speaking, 3 categories of law firms. You've got large law firms, which is 50 lawyers and above. Then you have got medium-sized law firms, which is from 6 to 50. And then you've got small law firms, which is less than 6 lawyers. Out of the 6,000 lawyers in Singapore, they are quite equally distributed amongst the 3 categories of law firms. So by and large, the large law firms tend to get work from the bigger companies, the bigger entities. They look after the bigger cases, all your MNCs and all your international contracts and so on. And then you have the small law firms, which by and large look after the domestic needs of Singaporeans. So most of the family law, criminal law, and your day-to-day domestic legal issues tend to go to the smaller law firms. And then sandwiched in between are your medium-sized law firms that cater to both the large and the small law firm needs. So by and large, all 3 categories have a good spread of the work, and that's how the structure of the legal profession plays out in Singapore. My law firm is a humble small law firm. It's a boutique law firm. We are well known for our matrimonial practice, our family law practice. And we are a general litigation firm. So I jokingly tell people that I quarrel for a living. Yeah.
Great. That's all. Thank you very much.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Welcome to One Partnership.
Yes, could you show us your law firm maybe briefly?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So we're actually sitting on reclaimed land here.
Oh.
So this office building is on reclaimed land, and that used to be the port just over there.
Great.
So part
Great
of
view.
it, so part of the port is being moving to the other side of the island, but all of this is reclaimed land all over here. Yeah. So and we have 3 floors in this building. And we're here for quite a number of years. Let me show you something.
Okay.
We are very
Great.
proud of this.
Very good.
A fair bit of art, local art, local art. But I wanted to show you this. So this is a pottery collection from a very famous local potter called this was curated from my founding partner.
Oh, great.
And the name of the potter is Iskandar Jalil. So we're very, very pleased with this.
Great. Okay, let's start our talk about law system of Singapore.
Yes, I'll be very happy to.
Okay.
Please.
Could you tell briefly about law system of Singapore?
Yes, happy to. So Singapore was a British colony. So our legal system was inherited from the British. It's English, very much common law. We have very similar court structures. In fact, a lot of English law was incorporated into Singapore law from many years ago. Contract law, for instance. But since then, Singapore has developed its own special, unique aspects. So there are some parts of Singapore contract law, for instance, which is a little bit different from English contract law. So in that sense, we have charted our own path. So we have the legislation system, cases, judgments have binding precedent value, and our oral advocacy, for instance, is very much in the style of the English, but with time we have developed our own local style and traits.
Okay, thank you. Do international law firms are presented at Singapore?
Oh, we have a very vibrant community here. There are more than 100 international law firms with offices in Singapore, and in fact more than 1,000 international lawyers who are registered working in Singapore. So it's been a very vibrant community. Singapore liberalized our system for a number of years now, and we in fact have a number of international law firms which have special licenses to practice certain specific aspects of Singapore law. And as a result, there are actually many Singaporean lawyers who work in international law firms in Singapore. The international law firms also use Singapore as a hub, essentially a base for their practice within Southeast Asia and for certain parts of Asia Pacific as well. I think they see Singapore as a good place to live, and to work as well. And I guess it's also part of Singapore's ambition to be a global financial center, and that's why we have a very vibrant international law firm community here.
Great. Could you tell us about your firm?
My firm. Well, we are a relatively young firm by Singapore standards. We celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. We have about 350 fee earners. It's very broad base across dispute resolution and corporate transaction. I'd like to think that we are ranked very highly across all the different sectors of work that we do. More importantly, I think we have a very diverse partnership and a relatively young partnership as well, so which is very exciting for us. And we have some offices outside Singapore. We also have our own alliance group of law firms that we work with across Asia Pacific as well, under something called the WPG. So it's a very interesting landscape for us to be in Singapore. As I said, I think we like to think that we are young and dynamic as well.
Okay. Do you have clients only from Singapore or in other Asian countries, or you have clients from Europe, USA, and other parts of the world?
Well, we do within Singapore work for most of the top corporations, government-linked companies, and across Asia, we actually count as our clients a number of the large, Asian conglomerates. Many of them have businesses in Singapore. Many of them have offices here. Many of them have very significant economic business activities here, and we've been fortunate to be able to do work for all the top Asian conglomerates, the Asian financial institutions, and actually we have many clients from Europe, from America. As you would know, there are many US MNCs again, with business activity in Singapore, and certainly on the transaction side, we are very active and very strong clientele presence there. On the dispute side, as you know, Singapore has become a hub. So even though some of these entities may not have business activities, say in Singapore, but arbitration clauses with Singapore's seat, we obviously find ourselves getting a very, very good share of European American MNC work. So a very, very diverse client group, and I guess we're extremely pleased about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please tell us about the legal system of Singapore.
Okay. Well, to understand the legal system, we need to understand also a bit about the history of Singapore. Modern day Singapore is essentially a common law jurisdiction. And the reason why it is one traces itself back to the fact that Singapore had been a colony of the United Kingdom. The British came over here in 1819, so a couple of centuries back, and during that time of the age of exploration, they acquired Singapore from the sultans who were ruling Johor in Malaysia. And as a result of that, the British realized that the country, or this island rather, was very well situated as a harbor. Nice, great place to dock large ships close to land. And it was very strategically located between east and west. So the colony took off from there. And as a result, by 1826, the British began to implement the common law system by importing the English legal system into Singapore by what they called a Charter of Justice. So from 1826, you will find that the colony of Singapore, as it then became, started to then have a very English legal system, practically deciding everything in terms of English law. So that's how it had started. And what happened was that, like many colonies that the British had actually acquired, many of the ex-colonies then became countries where they adopted essentially the British common law system. I think many examples come to mind. Neighboring Malaysia is one, Brunei is another one, India is another one, large jurisdiction. So all these countries can trace their common law system back to their history of being a colony. Singapore acquired self-government in 1963, but at that time we were actually part of Malaysia. By 1965, we got our own full independence and became an independent country in our own right. And at that point in time, Malaysia had the common law system, Singapore had the common law system, so we continued with that under the newly formed country. And for the last 58 years of Singapore's existence, our legal system has been essentially a common law jurisdiction. Now, for those who are familiar, of course, with the common law, it's not so much written down in statute books, in the laws that are passed by Parliament. Rather, you find that a lot of law is also made by the courts. The common law theory being that the judges are discovering the law as they decide case after case. So it's inevitable that you will find that as time goes by, common law countries begin to have different outcomes. So I think if you look at Singapore's jurisprudence today compared to when we just had independence 58 years ago, you'll find that the Singapore courts have taken steps in different directions from other common law jurisdictions. The way we approach the law is the same in common law countries, but I think almost every common law jurisdiction now has begun to have its own set of judge-made law that may differ in various respects. So currently that's what you see today. Now, I think in contrast perhaps to, say, the Russian Federation, where you're mostly a civil law country.
Yes.
So our differences really lie in the kinds of legal paradigms that the Russian Federation would have and what Singapore has. But I think, again, the world tends to be a place where ideas get exchanged a lot. So I do recall quite happily that from 2016, our government in Singapore had actually given a lot of incentive to the lawyers here to try to get to know the Russian legal system as well. So I think this kind of cross-pollination does help. So I have been a frequent visitor until COVID happened to St. Petersburg. Every year I would go there and I would drop by in Moscow.
International Legal Forum?
Yeah, I get to, yes. The Legal Forum,
great.
yes. So I was quite impressed.
Legal
by
Street.
that. Yeah. Legal Street, of course, will be the highlight. Everybody will be looking forward to that. We thought from a marketing point of view, it was a very intelligent idea and design for the law firms to have their own bar, their own pub, and then you could invite people from across the globe who were there, to your particular club, and then they could move on and circulate. Great idea. So I think with the lawyers that had come from Singapore, when we would go there, we would usually give a presentation, either arbitration, developments in arbitral law, the Singapore legal system, and so on and so forth. And we also got to meet up with a large number of large law firm leaders, government officials. And I think one of the high water marks in 2019 was that we reached a kind of understanding where I think the Russian Federation understood that Singapore, being a common law country, also had a pretty independent arbitration system and court system. So we understood that there was actually a move towards trying to have contracts try to use the Singapore SIAC clause. If that could take off, it would mean that, of course, the connection between Russia, Eastern Europe, and Asia, and Singapore in particular, would become closer. So that's obviously one of the goals that we hope the next few years will actually allow to mature, and then we can see much more work here. It's an interesting fact. We have this Singapore International Arbitration Center, and I was just thumbing through the number of arbitrators, about 100 over, and I was quite surprised to find there were close to 10 who were actually from Russia. So not bad in terms of representation. But I guess what really would drive the amount of collaboration will be if, in fact, there were more contracts using a Singapore clause. Yeah. And also if the volume of trade was to go up. I was also looking up the other day at some trade statistics. And it turns out that we don't have Russia and Singapore within our top 25 trading partners at a point in time right now. I think the largest area where there's collaboration is probably in the area of petrochemicals and refining and all that. So the hope is that there'll be an increase in business and commerce because that tends to create a kind of areas where lawyers can interact with other lawyers abroad and so on. Personally, I had the good fortune to deal with some Russian lawyers in the course of my career. I recall that in the past I had dealt with lawyers out of Vladivostok and then other lawyers handling other matters from Moscow itself.
Well, maybe Vladivostok, Dmitry Kafanov?
Yeah, there was an entrepreneur there who happened to be in this part of the world, and then he had a legal issue here. So that was when I managed to actually deal with one of them, and that was already close to 2 decades ago, a long time back. Yeah. So I mean that's the closest part of Russia, I guess, to where we are, and so that was an eye opener in terms of culture and mix. And since then, of course, because of arbitration, one of my longest running cases that went on from 2015 to 2020 was also for a Russian company that was a distributor of products. They went for arbitration, Chinese products actually. And so there was a long period of collaboration also with a Russian law firm. And so there was again another eye-opener in terms of how things are done. So I think people in business are the same everywhere. They're trying to maximize their company's interests, get things done. It's just that the nature of the transaction is different. But what adds a very interesting difference is, of course, the cultural mix. I think those days we were then having the World Cup going on over there. So one of those trips, the lawyers who were here instructing us brought along also some memorabilia from that event. That was quite interesting. And we also began to learn certain things also that maybe we can take as lessons that are important for Singapore and Russian collaboration, and that is in the area of translation. Yeah, that was not easy.
Really?
Because, on one hand, we had to convey the client's point of view to an arbitration being done in English. And the problem was that if we sourced for translators then in 2015, 2016, we couldn't find very competent legal translators. Yeah. So what we then did was that every now and then there would be the Russia-Singapore collaboration where there's a forum and conference run every year. So we noticed that the politicians who were on stage were practically talking to each other. And then we realized that it was because of the simultaneous translators. So we approached them and then finally located somebody willing to come here.
Brilliant.
And yes, and it solved the problem.
Great.
If not, you cannot imagine the difficulties we had. For example, in the first preliminary meeting that was for arbitration, we had an arbitrator in England, we had our clients in Russia, then we had the opposing counsel from another Western country, and we were having to communicate rather slowly, as the process went in. It took a very long period of time. So you can imagine that things that would have taken an hour at the most took practically half the day. But by the time we had simultaneous translations coming in, it was a breeze. But it's again something you'd learn, when you have the opportunity. And of course, it probably also means that the market here, if it grows, would be probably attractive enough for translators to want to come here.
I see.
Because our translator is actually based in the Russian Federation, and we had to make special arrangements to get him in every time. But it was well worth it. I think the clients appreciated that, because then everybody knew what was being said, everybody was on the same page, and decisions could be made very quickly. So we appreciated it. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Could you tell where usually typical Singaporean lawyer started? Where Singapore or maybe abroad? What countries?
Okay. Well, you can see that actually the practice of law, if you look at the statistics in Singapore, is a profession that doesn't actually have a very strong hold over the graduates, in the sense that many who graduate don't remain in the profession very long.
Really?
Surprising fact. Okay, let me give you some statistics. For example, we graduate or have available a pool of qualified graduates that number in about 1,000 plus a year. Okay, say about 300 come from the National University, another 300 come from the Singapore Management University, and there's also a new third university graduating about 200, 300. Okay. Now, if you add to that also the fact that a number of students also can qualify to apply to become lawyers if they hold the credentials from a recognized university, and the list is very small. So again, you're talking about 1,000 plus people graduating. But the Singapore legal profession only has about 5,000 plus qualified lawyers who are actually practicing as lawyers. So it begs the question, right? If you have so many graduating per year, what happens? If you look at statistics, the graph, as you look at the factor of the time versus the factor of the number of lawyers, is a U-shaped graph. Meaning that when people are young, there are numbers of them, many of them. But because it's a U-shaped graph, as time goes on, a number drop off. And finally you're left with the older, senior ones, and those who have survived that are at the end.
I see.
And I think one of the reasons is because a lot of ideas about how the profession operates might be a bit artificially influenced by what you watch in the movies and TV and drama shows, where a lawyer can be having girlfriend problems the night before, and the next morning they're able to go and do a incredible cross-examination in court. I mean, these things just obviously exist in the cinema world.
For example,
But
suits. Okay.
In reality, every appearance that's successful in court is the product of incredibly large numbers of hours of hard work in office, and with the client, and with the documents, and all that. So it's really one of those jobs where it's difficult to find space to do other things. One is really aiming to really make the most out of a career. And the way the world has moved, documents are now electronic, and there's so many nowadays. The amount of time needed to process the information of every new client, and then to find out all the angles, and adding to the challenge, the number of cases around the world. With computerization, there could be a judgment, for example, in Europe that's just come out on a point of common trade law, for example. And the lawyers who are fighting a point can't find a local case on it. You'll be forced to use cases from outside Singapore. So that would mean looking through databases of foreign countries, foreign judgments, and trying to find something helpful to the case. That's a lot of work, actually, if you think about it. Yeah. So it did happen to us as well, but sometimes with happy outcomes. We were doing an arbitration in the UAE, and we obviously were not conversant with the language there. And we were arguing an arbitration point for a Chinese client. And we wanted to make an argument that in a common law setting would have sounded really bad. But it turned out the law in the UAE accepted the proposition. And we only discovered that after trawling through journals written by international firms that were in the UAE. And there we go. So the extra hours that had gone in to go and dig around everywhere, again, was essential to getting the brief done. But you can imagine that if every case has those kinds of demands and they're multiplied by the number of clients you have, the job is not that easy to do.
I see.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like, say, for example, sometimes we look enviously at the medical profession. They see the patient, they finish with it, and that's it. Whereas the lawyer goes home, and then after satisfying the domestic front, the wife, the children, then your mind is constantly operating. Have I missed out something? And the temptation to find a case, a new case, to do more research, to read up one more document is always there. So the trade-off is that you need to have a very understanding family network. You need to be also, in a way, convinced that you'd like your life to be like that. So I think these factors, therefore, make it challenging, such that a young person leaving law school learns a lot about the law, but the person who comes out from law school doesn't know very much how the law is actually applied in practice. And you can only get it from actual work. And I think that's when reality sinks in. The enormity of the challenge becomes obvious then, you see. So in the end, I think many decide one way or another. It's a good foundation because, I mean, there are many people we know when we meet, even in our work, who have a basic law degree. They understand how things are done in a way from the legal perspective, but less so the practice point of view. But it does help them think more analytically in a way. But to really do this job, as your career, it's something that I think many students who had graduated thinking they would do it, then have a second thought later. So you find that as a young lawyer, I think the transition period is around the 3rd, the 5th year. By then, you'd have to probably locate an area of the law that you like very much and you want to specialize in. But that, of course, again presupposes that by the 3rd and 5th year, you're also sure that you want to invest the rest of your many years going down that path. Because now you're talking specialization, you see, and you're talking about commitment to a lifestyle that's not altogether easy, and at the same time also trying to pick up something and become the best in it, and it brings along its own challenges. So I think to a young person trying to strike out in a legal career, it's full of adventure for the ambitious, but at the same time it will be daunting for those who wanted a more predictable life, put it this way. So you will find that by that time, along the U-curve, why so many are dropping off is because many end up, say for example, becoming legal officers in a company, or they might end up teaching, or they might end up heading down to government offices, attorney general's chambers, legislation.
For example, Lee Kuan Yew,
Yeah.
he was Harry Lee during staying at Great Britain, and he was a lawyer there.
You're right. So, well, Lee Kuan Yew then obviously found something that was even more in line with his ambition, I suppose.
That's right.
And then he found a higher calling.
Yes.
But, it's not unknown. For example, we've had a recent partner who became the Deputy Attorney General, and then now he's become a High Court judge. We've supplied 5 judges so far to the courts. Yeah, so many eventually move on to other things. We have also partners who have become politicians and members of parliament and things like that, and government ministers. So I think the avenues are always very, very varied. And I think for those who have done some years in the law, it does help you to grapple with crisis situations, to handle them. Because, for example, if in the case of a transaction lawyer, you want to do a deal, always there's a struggle oftentimes between what the client wants to do, which is fast, which is sometimes questionable, but sometimes he believes it makes everyone happy. Why don't we just be less strict about things? But that's when the lawyers then have the challenge, right, to face the crisis, to persuade the client it's for your long-term best interest. It may sound great then, it may sound like the right thing to do then, but the job of the lawyer is always to manage all of these conflicts, all these different expectations. So it does drain a lot of people, I think. So to those students that you mentioned earlier, I think the legal career does, in a way, expose them to a lot of harsh realities, and many have to make a choice. Really, do I want to live my life like that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to share these views.
Okay. The first question is, could you tell a little bit about legal system of Singapore?
Right. Well, I mean, as you know, Alexander, Singapore used to be a British colony, so it's not surprising that Singapore is a common law system. One of the relatively few common law countries in this part of the world, because most of our neighbors are, from the civilian tradition, including Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. But Singapore is a common law system, so it's very much based on case law. But increasingly in our modern world, we also see a lot of statutory law.
Okay, thank you. The second question, could you tell a little bit about legal education, about preparation of lawyers at Singapore?
Right. Yes, most certainly. Our basic law degree is the 4-year Bachelor of Laws, which is what someone will need to get qualified for the legal profession in Singapore. We also recognize quite a number of overseas universities, particularly universities from England, as you can imagine, for historical reasons. But increasingly, we are getting in 3-year Juris Doctor students. These are students who already have a degree in another discipline and they want to read law in 3 years. If they already have a law degree, then they can do the JD in 2 years. So effectively now we have both undergraduate law students as well as graduate law students who are reading the degree for practice in Singapore. On top of this, we also have quite a large group of master students, about 200 every year in our law school.
Thank you. And the third question, what could you tell us about the key issues at company law of Singapore, maybe about state-owned enterprises and so on?
Right. Well, I think that I'll just make 2 points here. I think that one of the big issues that all company lawyers have to grapple with is that we have statutes that have come about from quite a long time ago. And many of the provisions today might seem a little bit archaic and old-fashioned in the modern world, especially with the use of technology. So I think one of the big questions we need to ask ourselves is, do we need to go further to try to amend the Companies Act and do a deep dive to sort of make sure that our statutes are up to date? On state-owned enterprises, I will say this. I think state-owned enterprises will continue to be important in many different parts of the world. And I think the key at the end of the day is the extent to which the state or the government will allow state-owned enterprises to be managed relatively independently, objectively, and in the best interest of all shareholders and not just the state. Singapore has done this relatively well, which is why the state-owned enterprises in Singapore are ranked very highly and have a good track record of profitability and good governance as well. So I think that's the key, ensuring that the state-owned enterprises can be managed independently without undue influence from outside third parties.
Thank you very much.
Как и в МГУ, рядом с юридическим факультетом находится какой факультет? Правильно, школа бизнеса Ли Куан Ю. Рядом с МГУ и юридическим факультетом МГУ находится экономический факультет. Экономисты и юристы – лучшие друзья. Друзья-соперники иногда. Пожалуйста. Это Сингапурский университет менеджмента. В центре, рядом с деловым кварталом, рядом много консалтинговых компаний. Ну а вот видите, опять снимают свои тиктоки или просто корреспонденты. Упс. Okay, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm fine. Could you show us your great office at this tower?
Sure. Well, this is the meeting room floor.
Okay.
So this is where we have all our meetings, a number of meetings. But let me show you our workspaces. Let's just go up one floor.
Okay.
I'll just show you a little bit. We have 12 offices in 10 countries, and that's why, that's our tag, Lawyers Who Know Asia. And we are about 1,000 lawyers across our offices.
How many lawyers work here at this tower?
Singapore would be about 550.
550?
Yes, across 2 floors. Come, let me just show you. So this is like a cafeteria where we serve breakfast.
Great.
For lawyers, they can have meals, have coffee, I'm told the coffee is pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't drink coffee.
It's wonderful.
And so this is the where we do our work. It's like the working spaces. So these are the secretaries. The lawyers sit here.
More multinational, as I see.
Yeah. So our idea is to not have the traditional form of big offices and
I understand.
Yeah, so it's like an open office. So I'll show you my room.
Okay.
So this is where my room is, and we basically have like an open space where people work together. And yeah.
Great view. What's this? Is this a seaport?
Yeah, this is, Singapore is one of the busiest ports in the world. So that's what you're seeing here. That's the Singapore port. It starts here and it'll go all the way down for quite a long distance. Across the water there, that's an island. You have a clusters of islands to the south of Singapore. And that's Sentosa Island.
Oh, Sentosa.
Yeah, so right there, all the rich, wealthy foreigners, Russians can buy properties there. There's no restriction. And of course, there's a very big casino there. And on the other side, you'll see the bay, Marina Bay. There's the second casino. And they're building a train station here, so we are going to be surrounded by 3 or 4 train stations.
So here is the building process.
Yes, they're building the trains. Yes, construction is going on, and that of course is the central business district just behind us.
Okay, I see.
Right.
Great.
Right. So,
Okay, let's go to another place.
Yeah. So basically it's an open concept. We just moved in 2019. And
I've never been to this office. I've been to another office.
Yeah, maybe the old one. So we have rooms like this for us to
Meeting in progress.
Yeah, so that we can discuss things or Zoom together with clients.
Great.
Yeah, that's it. It's just to show you a little bit of what we do here. So this is our biggest meeting room, but that's being used.
But I understand that this is the biggest and the busiest one.
Yeah. So so that you will see this. These are pictures. We are about 50 years old, and so this is so we have a bit of a video. So that's the Chief Justice. He used to be our managing partner. Suresh Menon is now the Chief Justice. V.K. Rajah, Stephen Chong used to be the Attorney General. Quentin Low is a judge in the Singapore International Commercial Court. So these were some of our partners who have now, the Chief Justice, a number of the Attorney Generals, a number of the judges, all have come from our firm.
Great.
So that's the Chief Justice, So it's
Great.
So that's why we are known as Rajah Tann Asia.
Now I've got it.
Как известно, Сингапур ввел санкции против Российской Федерации. Впоследствии Россия включила Сингапур в список недружественных государств. Очень хотелось бы надеяться, что это временное явление, и что те дружеские и позитивные взаимоотношения между юридическими мирами России и Сингапура, которые складывались на протяжении долгих лет, будут продолжены. И надеемся, что останутся площадки, на которых можно будет взаимодействовать с юристами Сингапура, российским юристам. Будем надеяться, что мы будем продолжать сотрудничество по уже начатым гуманитарным проектам. И будем надеяться, что рано или поздно эта ситуация неопределенности закончится, и юристы Сингапура и России будут в полном объеме взаимодействовать, исходя из реальной, дружественной обстановки и атмосферы. Надеемся, что вам понравился наш фильм. Мы действительно старались. И надеемся, что правовая система Сингапура стала вам хоть чуточку ближе и понятнее. Смотрите наши фильмы из серии «Право стран Азии». Помните, что юристы тоже люди. И всем удачи!
Бананово-лимонном Сингапуре, ой, когда поет и плачет океан, и гонит под слепительной ладуи птиц дальний караван.